Hello, everyone. Hello. My name is Angelique Jackson. I'm a senior entertainment writer at Variety, and I mean, first of all, I love the energy in this room already. I got to sit in the back for a little while and hear how you all reacted to this marvelous piece of art by one of our great artists. Really, I know what you guys are here for and what you have been, some of you, here for 2 days now. So without further ado, let me please introduce the writer, producer, and director of Priscilla, Sofia Coppola. Well, while I was sitting in this theater a few moments ago, there was laughter, there were gasps, this was a full-bodied reaction to this film.
It played well. I'm so glad to hear that. We really just finished it a month ago, so it's exciting to have it out in the world and you be one of the first audiences.
Well, Sophia, I'd like to start at the beginning, because this film, of course, is inspired by Priscilla's beautiful memoir, Elvis and Me. And in that story, she really lays out what it was really like to be in this relationship that I feel like so many people think they know so much about. We see them on magazines, all of these things, and we really didn't know. As you were reading the book and really musing over this story, what scenes did you see first?
Yeah, I was so impressed to hear all the detail and her impression of what it was really like, and I just had no idea what her life was like, and I didn't know that she was going to high school when she lived at Graceland. I can't imagine being a new kid at school while you're living with Elvis at Graceland, and then how she had to stay up all night to be a fun girlfriend and then have to wake up and go to school the next day, just the reality of her, and just all the details. I love that she talked about putting her eyelashes on before she went into labor, and just how unique, but just how she grew up in such a unique way, in such an unusual setting, and I was really impressed by her strength at the end to be able to leave and find her own way after growing up with him being such a part of her identity. So I was just really struck with how she told her story, and in making the film wanted to always stick with her point of view. And I remember calling her and saying, would you consider a film being made of your book? And she said, oh, let me think about it. She said she liked my work, and so she would consider it. And I was really thrilled to get to work with her and ask her questions and hear her story.
Yeah, she's said what we all here in this theater know is that you've made such a hallmark of your career about showing the interior lives of women, girls and women, and those little moments, like you just said, the putting on the lashes before she goes into labor. That's something that is all the hubbub is going on outside of the room, but this is what we're focused on because it says stuff about the time, says things about Elvis's expectations, and it also reminds you that these were this was our royal family. We expected it to be like Princess Kate out there with on the steps with the baby. What was it like to capture all of those smaller moments? Because that's really what this is. This is the behind closed doors.
Yeah, that's what I loved about her book was what was it really like, just the human aspect of living there, and the first image I have was her feet sinking into the shag carpet, and when she first sees Graceland and the drapes. So I tried to kind of go into what her experience might be like, but in her book she really talks about these real moments and all the details, which I think just connects us as humans, of thinking of her besides this figure of kind of this perfect doll, what it was really like in her frustrations and her and her joys and the fun and the darkness. So I just I really took that from her book, and it really helped to have all these details and specific moments that could fill out what her life might have been like.
Well, tell me a little bit about that opening sequence, because it does. It sets up, the world that we're going into. What were some of your inspirations as you wanted to kind of paint the picture of what this version of Graceland and this general vibe, what this vibe was going to be like?
Yeah, to me it was sort of like a fairy tale that starts to melt as you go into it, and it seemed so perfect and ideal, and then like the reality of what's really behind it, and I thought, the first image I thought was her feet in the shag carpet, and thinking about the shag carpet at Graceland, and making kind of this vivid, colorful world that you see the photographs of Graceland and the turquoise drapes, and so imagining the world, and then kind of I thought to have a flash of like our perception of Priscilla, and then go back in time to the real girl and what her experience was, and I wanted to frame the story around her time at Graceland, like kind of bookending it with going in the gates and then leaving the gates at the end, but then I thought we have to start back in Graceland of how she met him, so kind of just trying to get her to Graceland, and it's almost like Oz, the colors all shift, and her description of like her first love and that feeling of her first kiss. I love when she's walking down the hallway and you can just feel her just imagine what that moment was like, but what if your first kiss was Elvis and you couldn't tell anyone in school? Yes, just really trying to imagine, and she did a good job in her book of explaining, or how I felt like she conveyed how she felt in these different big moments in her life.
Absolutely. I mean, that idea that it all just started just sitting in the soda shop. She really was just sitting there at the soda counter, and this is where we are now, all of these years later. There are so many of those little details, even from that opening sequence where the perfume that she wears, and then that Elvis flirts with that girl wearing the exact same Chanel number 5. Still upset about that. As you're working with your team, your production team, and then also, of course, with the great Kaylee Spigney, to develop what this world is going to be like for Priscilla, you only also had 30 days to shoot this film, so you're also going back and forth in time. Tell me a little bit about those conversations that you all were having, and how you were able to pinpoint kind of each space we were in for her.
Yeah, it was really important to me that we have the same actress play her, and from 14 to 29, I was like, how are we gonna find someone to do that? When I met Kaylee, she's 25, but she's so believable. She's such a baby face. I thought you can believe her as the young one, and she really changed her body language and way of speaking. But I was really impressed with how she kept track, because we shot the movie all out of order for the locations, and we shot in 30 days, which I'm really proud of. But it was a scramble to fit so much in, and but she was able to keep track of where she was, and I was saying again, like in the morning we'd be shooting her as a kid, in the afternoon she was playing, pregnant, like it was all over, and she was able to really keep track of where she was in the character's development. So that was exciting to see when it started to come in order, like, oh, this is gonna work, and that she makes that progression. I was really impressed by it. And Stacey Patati did the costumes, did such a great job, and that really helped Kaylee and all of us know where we were in the story by like how tall her hair is and what she's wearing, and we knew in the 70s that she'd become more natural, and so we could really chart her where she was in the story by the costumes and the hair and makeup, which is a really big part of it. The wigs were such a big part of the story.
I think she had mentioned that I think one of the first days you all shot was the when she gets the car for graduation. So that is quite a tall wig in that one.
Yes, I mean, it's so great to have all the photos of Priscilla, and that was reminding me of Marie Antoinette, because they're so over the top at that time. Yes, and for her graduation look, she had a pretty extreme look, and they were lucky that there were so many photos of her, and they had so many glamour moments. And she said that Elvis would always dress up. He wouldn't come downstairs unless he had like a 3-piece suit on, and they were just so dedicated to style and showing that. And then as she comes into her own, she kind of gets back to her original natural look before her Memphis makeover.
Yes, and one of my favorite moments is the moment after the kind of Memphis makeover, when she first goes back to her home with her parents, and they see what has become of their daughter. She is disheveled, she is crying, and all of these things, again, really happened to Priscilla.
Yeah, I always love that moment in the book, because I remember her describing like coming off the plane with her smeared mascara and ratted hair, and the look on her mother's face. And I'm the mother of a 16-year-old. Like, you can imagine they sent their daughter, and she comes back all smeared mascara. What happened to her? And so I just thought that was all these little moments that say so much.
With this relationship, and the way that Priscilla describes it, there was a lot of tumultuousness to it. It was not, as picture perfect fairy tale as you think. But somehow when she explains it, there's also, this book came out in 1985, so it was after, of course, Elvis had passed.
Yeah.
But you kind of get this impression that even if he had read it, he wouldn't have been hurt or offended.
Yeah, when she talks about him, she has so much love for him and respect for him, and I think I have the feeling she was just telling what her experience was. But she always said that he had a lot of love, and I always thought that, any mistreatment came out of his not being evolved or his struggles, and trying to show him as a human, flawed human, like everyone, and that, I'm not trying to make excuses for any behavior, but she talked about like how frustrated he was in his career and how how he dealt with that, and we all know what happened to him. So I think it was a real honest human aspect of showing both sides. And I know that she sees both of it, and that they had a lot of great moments, and then there were really hard times, and she struggled and was isolated. And I thought she gave us full picture of a complicated relationship.
As a filmmaker, what went into portraying, that loneliness, that isolation? I mean, we literally see her as the girl kind of behind the glass in this beautiful mansion, but she's alone. All she has at times is the dog, or, a couple friends here and there.
Yeah, I mean, the way she described it seemed so hard that she wasn't allowed to invite friends home, and she wasn't allowed to go get a job and do things that she wanted to do, that she was pretty, protected. And it was at a time where, of my mother's generation, when you were expected to be satisfied with a successful husband and a beautiful home, and what more could you want? And I think that was really sentiment of that era and the women of that era. And I know there was a lot of struggles in that, and trying to find her way. And I was glad that she was able to find a life of her own outside of him after that. But yeah, I think it looks like her like a fantasy dream on the outside, and what her real experience was.
In those moments of fantasy, we also do have real moments of intimacy between the two of them. Like the idea that they took those Polaroids of each other, like that was one of their real moments of connection that they would have. Tell me a little bit about capturing those, and just how important it was to include so many of these things.
Yeah, I wanted to show their connection, and she talks about that in the book. And I remember asking her, like, where's that box of Polaroids, and what happened to it? And she talks about, like, they would dress up in costumes, and I was like, well, as a director, you have to ask specifically, like, well, what costumes, because we have to get the costumes. But so it was interesting to ask her, and I want, they're personal, it's personal, but I don't want to pry, but I also want to get it right. So that was a whole balance in finding that, and really wanting to show, that they had this really intense connection, and to show, the highs with the lows.
What was the question you were most nervous to ask Priscilla?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it was the hardest for me to ask her about the end of like their breakup, and for her to have to relive it. And I could tell when she talked about it, it was like a painful experience. So like having to, and even watching those scenes at the end with her, I felt bad that I was making her relive a painful experience. But I'm sensitive and talking to her about it. But just for her having to, because she was like really, I could tell she was reliving these stories that she told me, and I could tell that still, was a painful memory.
Because as you say, she really does tell everything in such vivid detail. I mean, I hope you all do go back and experience the book if you haven't. It's remarkable, all of the things that she remembers about that life.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised when I would ask her questions that she knows, she still remembers these little details of that time from, so long ago, and as a teenager and everything.
What was one of your favorites that you were able to work in? Because, and a lot of times when you're adapting, from a book to the screen, like there are things you have to condense or move around, but this is truly so faithful to exactly how and when everything happened. And sometimes it's not, it's like layered in a way. So for example, like when they speed up to when she goes into labor, it's because they had like a plan of how to escape the paparazzi, and they went to the wrong hospital. So just like stuff like that, you were still able to work into the story.
Yeah, I forgot about that because that's a much more elaborate thing that we couldn't do all of that. So you just try to get like the essence of what the feeling was, and that they were all like scattered and he was excited, and try to get that energy into it. And we had to edit a lot, so because we couldn't include everything. So you know, I really wanted to. There was a scene in the book where she talks about riding a motorcycle like 8 months pregnant, which I thought was such a great image that I wanted to have, but we weren't able to shoot that. But this idea that she was always trying to be the ideal woman, and even when she was pregnant, she's like, I'm not going to slow down. I'm gonna still be fun and do all these things, and that she really pushed herself, and how hard that must have been to always be trying to like live up to this ideal. And yeah, one of my favorite moments is in the book she talks about talking to the nun at school, and who's like, you know, telling her to do better, do her schoolwork, and she's thinking, how can I explain to her that at night I'm picking out like which handgun goes with the beaded dress, and I was like, how do I convey that? So we just got a shot of that, and it kind of gives the feeling, but just like just how these different extremes in her life, being a schoolgirl day, and then, you know, part of Elvis's entourage at night.
And also, of course, the idea that she was not a wallflower. You know, while she was very young and obviously very impressionable, there were plenty of moments where she stood up to Elvis and called him out on some of his behaviors.
Yeah, no, I was impressed by that. And even there's like a scene where she's telling him, like, you know, I have desires, and like I don't know, for a young woman to be able to say that, and you know, I was impressed that she was able to stand up to him, and eventually really to have the strength to leave, because at that time, it was, you know, for a woman not to have any income of their own and to go out and get divorced and try to make a life of their own, I think took so much courage. I think it was really a different time in the early 70s, so that I always thought she had this inner strength about her.
Well, I did want to ask you real quick about obviously recreating some of these iconic moments. Of course, the wedding is something that I think all of us have seen before. You have this beautiful, of course, Chanel gown that was crafted for this film. Tell me a little bit about getting Jacob and Kaylee and just, yeah, recreating this thing that we all think we know.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many home movies that you can see on YouTube, which were really helpful just to see like the way that they related to each other and how they lived, and having so many photos, and of course the wedding is such a mythic moment, to recreate that in a way that feels authentic and you know, not corny, I guess. And I don't know, something about her framed in that flower archway always stayed in my mind, because they look like the figures on the top of the cake, and they're just like this romantic ideal that had a very you know, realistic dark side of this relationship. I thought was so interesting. But the wedding, I wanted it to be, you know, so romantic, and this kind of moment, that fairy tale moment before it kind of falls apart. And yeah, we had Chanel made a beautiful dress for us. Our budget was limited, so thankfully they helped with all their workmanship to make this beautiful dress. It was very exciting when it showed up that day, and it was really fun to see Kaylee and Jacob. We shot 16 millimeter for some of the home movies of the wedding, and like the movies that you see, and just to have that texture. And yeah, it was really exciting when we like put those moments that we all know so much in the memory and saw it come to life.
And speaking of come to life, we have these two superstars kind of born before us. Obviously, Kaylee and Jacob, we've been watching them in other roles before, but this is them playing two mythic, iconic figures. What was it about them that you, in particular, were so drawn to? And then when you actually saw them on the screen, you're looking at the monitor, what impressed you the most?
Yeah, I think Kaylee just has this ability, a talent of being able to express so much just on her face that you know, by just a very little tweak, I would say something, and then all of a sudden her expression would change. Some actors are able just to convey so much by doing so little, and just in her face, I don't know, it's sort of mysterious how that is. But she was really good at, you know, interpreting what I was looking for, understanding the character. She met Priscilla and really had a way of conveying her essence. And the same with Jacob. I mean, I was like, who am I going to get to play Elvis? No one looks like Elvis. And I met Jacob, and he just had that charisma and lovability, and he's sensitive, where I thought, you know, Elvis had this extreme sensitivity and charm and warmth, and then so Jacob has those qualities that I think come through, and it was really important to me that he had that just that lovable side to counterbalance the darker side.
Well, I think all we can say is that we can't wait to see what they do next, and hopefully what they do next with you, because I did forget to mention that Kirsten played a role in Kaylee coming to this part, right?
Yeah, I met Kaylee, and then, just had coffee with her once, and I'd seen her, a TV show she'd been on, and then, Kirsten Dunst is doing Civil War that's coming out from A24 next year. I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see it. Anyway, we just shot with Kaylee, and she told me how much she liked working with her, and how nice she was, and how talented she was, and I really trust Kirsten, so I knew if Kirsten said she was talented and great to work with, that I could have the confidence to cast her after just meeting her one time. And when I met Jacob, I met him at a restaurant, and like all the girls just turned like sunflowers to the sun. And I thought, and then when we were in Venice, like girls were crying, and I was like, it felt like the closest you get to that Elvis energy.
Well, thank you for bringing that Presley energy to all of us. We are so grateful to have you here to discuss.